God is not dazzled by some big number. What he's impressed by is people that see the people around them the way that he does. And I would say I'm not there yet. But the more I look at kids, and the more I'm surrounded with people who love children well, like Lindsey, the more I get a sense of the way God sees me. I'm just that kid that messed up.
Welcome to Jesus Calling Stories of Faith, featuring author and speaker Bob Goff, who wrote the New York Times bestselling book Love Does, and his daughter, second grade teacher Lindsey Goff Viducich. Together, Bob and Lindsey talk about what it was like growing up in the Goff family and Bob's unconventional parenting style. They also talk about the important work they are doing overseas and why they're passionate to help children around the globe. Together, they have written a book for children called Love Does for Kids.
I'm Bob Goff, and I'm just so glad to be here. I'm a lawyer by training, but what we do now is we go around the world and we start schools for kids, particularly kids that are in countries where there's just a lot of upheaval. So that's what we spend most of our time doing now. I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area and then moved down to San Diego for college. And I've been here ever since. I went to law school down here, stuck around, met Sweet Maria. She wasn't Sweet Maria Goff at the time I met her, but she was after a long time of pursuing her. She became Sweet Maria Goff. And then we've just had this beautiful family. And one of my favorite people in that family is sitting next to me, and it's Lindsey.
My name's Lindsey Goff Viducich, and I'm a second grade teacher here in San Diego. And so I also spend a lot of time in schools and working with kids. But I love my job. I love it. I love getting to be with my students all day. I have 26 students. And so all day I get to teach people how to read, how to use a computer, how to add things. It's awesome. So this is what it was like to grow up in San Diego and with Dad, is that when we moved into our house, like our childhood home where most of our growing up years happened, instead of just having regular bunk beds, Dad lag bolted in rock climbing holds into the walls so that we could belay each other into bed. And I feel like that pretty much sums up our childhood.
Yeah.
Like if there's a normal version, you do just a little. What's the whimsical version right off to the side?
Yeah,
That's
I
what we did.
remember when I was growing up, nobody could touch the walls. That was like a big offense. It was like a misdemeanor or a felony if you touch the walls. So when I remember thinking, when I get a house, and I'm going to do whatever I want to those walls. So I think it was cheaper than therapy. And the whole idea of like belaying each other into bed, it was never a problem getting anybody to bed. They're like,
no,
it's bedtime.
Like, this is amazing.
Yes. So part of that, most of us are either a reflection of or a reaction to the people that have been closest to us. And so if you were raised in one way, you'll either reflect more of that or react to that. Lindsey, what would you say that you are? A reflection, a reaction, or both?
I think a reflection.
And how so?
Yeah, a lot of stuff. Like the way that now that I'm married and we have our own family, and that idea that like you always do the meaning, you always pick meaning over practical every time. I think that was a big family value, which is really great because I've married someone very practical, so we balance each other out. But like the always choose the meaningful version and the whimsical version, and like the relationship building version. And you kind of like play, like you structure life around that. Even when Mom would leave out of town, you would take us to like go do kid dinners.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah. So we got to pick out whatever we wanted to in Vons.
Oh, remember down to getting busted by one of your teachers?
Yes, my first grade teacher. Because we just gotten
spam and all this nasty stuff.
Yes.
And where was she? Up by the checkout?
She was shopping. She was in the house. But she thought it was awesome and
Jolt
helped us
Cola.
find stuff.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
We would learn like things about nutrition. We would have like really healthy food. But then we would take the spam and no lie, check it out. One of the ingredients is mechanically separated chicken. Remember? So what we had the kids do, everybody drew a picture of what that machine looked like. A little conveyor belt with chickens on it, and then there'd be little fillets at the end, and somehow they got mechanically separated. that whole idea of being engaged, it isn't something that happens when you fall in love and slip a ring on somebody's finger. That's not engaged. It's what you do afterwards. Is to say, I'm going to live a life of engagement and wonder and whimsy, and everybody does it different. So riff on your version, however it is that God wired you. Just be that, and then pull that out of your kids. Let them bring you along delightfully. If you let them off the chain, they'll just take you on some great adventures. There's a beautiful thing about being present. Not just in proximity to one another. We're still working on that as a family, just how to be more and more present. The reason that I wrote Love Does is I felt like I wanted to get a story out there that didn't have a lot of luggage attached to it. So I just thought I would say true things, and I thought I would do what Jesus did. And in Matthew 15, it says he never talked to anybody without telling them a story. So I just took the simplest stories I could and said it in the fewest words possible. And I didn't include a bunch of Bible verses. I just said things that were true. If you want a Bible verse, read the Bible. It's full of them. Well, one of the things that we can do to the people that we love, to our children, is to just speak the truths of the gospel, but you don't need to dress it up. Make that super accessible. Jesus is the smartest theologian ever, and he points to two sheep and he says, it's like one of those gets away. So making your faith like not easy, because it's not easy. It'll kill every previous version of you, but to make your faith simpler. And so the intent of writing Love Does was to write a book that somebody that's a third-year seminary student might read and say, you know, that's actually accurate. But more importantly, I want the guy at the tire store that doesn't know anything about faith to say, I actually feel invited. And so the idea of writing Love Does for Kids was really this concoction that our family had together, and our best candidate to write that was Lindsey Goff Viducich. So why did you write, what was your reason behind writing Love Does Kids?
We talk a lot in our family, and I think the reason behind why Love Does has all these schools and is helping all these kids is that kids are our hope. Like, they're the ones who are going to speak for us. And so that idea of these kids getting to know, like, and Jesus talking all the time in the Bible about how he's nuts about kids, like that over and over and over again is a theme. And so the idea of little kids getting to know that the kingdom of God is this very real thing is so neat. Or like that these kids who are going to be our future leaders are introduced to who Jesus is, so that they can be leaders like Jesus and follow Jesus.
We've been working in Uganda through this organization, Love Does, for the last, it's been 17 years. And when we first started, we decided we were going to start a school. Lindsey went over early on. Tell me what that was like. We just bought you a one-way ticket. Yeah. How old were you?
I was in college. I was like 19. Yeah.
What a bad idea. So what happened?
We went, well, I was there like right before the school started. So it was like 2 rooms in a brick building. There really wasn't much there.
Yeah, we told 400,000 young people, among the 1.5 million people that were displaced by the war, that they could come to our school for free. We'll give you an education. And on the first day of school, 9 kids showed up. I wasn't bummed though. I'm like, we got a soccer team. And we had a soccer field, but it had a big mango tree in the middle of it. We're like, whatever, just like, get around it. But that whole idea to just not be discouraged by what happens, but be just so captivated by this idea of what might happen in people's lives. And then fast forward, and a lot of people at Love Does working for a lot of long hours. And there's a school now with 37 buildings on 50 acres, and we'll just cross 1,000 students that are currently enrolled, and probably a like number that have graduated.
So as part of our World Leaders Project, we got to meet with the Vice President of Bulgaria, and one of the things that was so striking to us about that interview and was so memorable is that when we got there, we were really nervous. And he told us when we sat down, like, children, I am more nervous meeting with you than if I were meeting with your president. And so it was this immediately disarming, like,
Yes.
oh, already you've
And then
made a
remember
friend.
he like clapped his hands or something?
Yes, and out came kid food, and he had all these, he had 3 little apple juices for us. We like sat with our apple juice and candies and got to learn about being friends.
Yeah,
from
this is
his
a guy that
interview.
used to be the ballistic missile commander for the Soviet bloc country. But he understood about friendship. And what were some of the things he said about friends? Like that you actually, a friend knows.
Yeah, so he said one of his big things that he talked about was to make a friend is to be a friend. And so that idea of like you need to start treating people like they're your friend already, and then you become friends. So that was kind of the whole idea behind this World Leaders Project. But then the other really neat thing that I love that he did was that immediately disarming saying, like, I'm more nervous meeting with you than if I were meeting with your president. I think that's one of those things that in friendship, you don't have to be perfect to become friends with people. Like
Yes.
admitting like your like weak spots too.
So now, fast forward like a decade or two, and you guys end up back in Bulgaria. Doing it was a service
Yes.
project for somebody, and you
Yeah.
decided to go see a friend. They're still in leadership.
Yeah, so we wrote a letter and we said, hey, we're gonna be in town. Can we come and visit you and say hi? It was my brother Richard and I. And he wrote back and said, yes, absolutely. And when we got there and met with him in his office, he pulled out this pen that said Robert K. Goff, attorney at law on it. And he handed it to us and he was like, you need to tell your dad to keep track of his things. I've had this in my office for 10 years. But then the beautiful thing that he said is, I'm so happy that when I found it, I'm so happy that he left it, because that was a sign that he would return.
Yeah, like beautiful things. So maybe when you go over to your friends, leave something behind. You can leave a $20 bill, but like leave something behind. Just have these beautiful traditions, and that's a beautiful thing about making friends with people. Like they'll have these beautiful traditions. They'll tell you, and you say, what does that mean, and why is that important? And it actually makes you a friend. You make little things into beautiful big things in your life. It's a lot of what Jesus said, that the smallest things become the biggest thing. And the way that mustard seed story ends is so that people could have rest. And here's a guy who took time to go meet these 3 kids in Blazers. And I would say that's had a pretty big impact on you, even, decades later.
Oh yeah, and we asked him at one point, and as we've made these friends with folks through that project that we did, we'll ask them later, like, why did you say yes to us? We were 3 little kids in San Diego. Why would you want to meet with us? And you know what they said? Nobody's ever asked us that before.
Isn't that crazy?
Like, nobody ever asked, will you be my friend? And so there's power in that too.
Many of the countries that we do work in as an organization, Love Does, are countries embroiled in civil wars. Uganda just finished a 25-year war. Iraq, Somalia, these other countries that we're headed towards, they have this one thing in common. There's a lot of kids that get caught up in the middle of it. And one of the best indicators that the UN has found for the future of a country is how the country treats their children. And if they treat their children well, that country is going to prosper. And if they don't treat their children well, it's not going to prosper at all. And so part of the idea behind writing A Love Does Kids is to say, let's go treat our kids well. Let's point them towards beautiful stories that are super accessible, and then to say, just go make your own story. A win is when you turn the last page of that story and you want to run outside with a handful of Band-Aids. Say, let's go do that and see how it turns out. Because a bad day isn't when it doesn't work. I would say a bad day around our household is when we didn't try. So the whole idea of Love Does for Kids was to just, it isn't getting it down to like a less significant message. It's actually, with fewer words, what if we provide a more significant message to children and their parents about how they can enter into this adventure called raising a family.
As a teacher, something that I absolutely love is taking really big abstract concepts and then translating them into 8-year-olds, like bringing these really big ideas like grace and the kingdom of God and forgiveness and mercy, and making that into something that a little kid can understand. And so what books like Jesus Calling for Kids and then Love Does for Kids both do is that they take these really abstract concepts and then they make it so that it's accessible to these little hearts and little minds, and that those things can really sink in and become part of who kids are.
Yes, and sometimes with illustrations. I know you spend a lot of time with that. Tell us why pictures. What have you seen in kids' lives when they see a picture and identify with it?
As a teacher, I would say reading pictures is reading. Like, that's the first step. And so for a little kid to be able to flip through a book and see these really vibrant pictures and be able to tell the story themselves and remember these big concepts on their own with a picture attached to it, that's been really
And the
neat.
coolest part is when somebody has a photograph or an image that you respond to, that you start talking about your life and your story. And that's what we want for parents and their kids. Just like with Jesus Calling for Kids, the idea is to tee up the conversation that could happen, start from something really relatable to something in their lives that's really relatable. And so one of the things that we each do, we have these rhythms, these habits that we start. And we hope that people will take a chapter, that they'll read through that almost like a devotion, that they would take that and then they would, when the couple pages is done, they would say, so to kids, what do you think about that? Isn't that what your style is in school? You read a little bit and then ask them, why do you do that? And what are you hearing back from the kids when you draw out from them? Like, we'll read, what did you see in the pages?
It's actually really beautiful when you sit and read with a child. Like I immediately thought of our little nephew. Like, he calls it being cozy. So he'll say, like, can we go be cozy? He's 2 and he wants to sit and read and be cozy. And so that idea that a child's going to love reading because they've like sat and been cozy and like get to read about this, but that they're going to associate that with faith. Like, that they think about it in that way, that it's like this place of comfort and safety and all those things. So I love that picture of a parent being able to do that with a child with these children's books.
And the crazy part, when you start having these habits in your family and start doing it with your kids, these ripples go out and you don't even know as a parent what shore they're going to wash up on, but you know they went out. And so take the time. Read these devotions, Jesus Calling, Love Does for Kids. Read these things with your kids. Let it feel like that's a really cozy, safe place. It's not where you're just learning stuff. It's where you're actually expressing stuff about how you see the world, how you see your faith. So we really hope you'll enjoy the book.
Look for Bob and Lindsey's book, Love Does for Kids, at your favorite book retailer today. Thank you for watching Jesus Calling Stories of Faith. Be sure to join us every first and third Sunday of each month for a new Jesus Calling Story of Faith, debuting live on the Jesus Calling Facebook page. You can also find our stories on the Jesus Calling YouTube channel and on Instagram's IGTV through the Jesus Calling Instagram page. Be sure to subscribe to the Jesus Calling YouTube channel by going to youtube.com/JesusCallingBook so you can be notified when a new story of faith is available.